World of Words, Special Season, Days of the Race. Episode 2, The Day of the Height. The day that lifts the light. Welcome to the second episode of our special season, Days of the Race. A three-part movement through those early May days in which spring lifts its step and the world begins to show its quiet heights. This season leads you through three spaces: the Bittwege, the days that walk the fields; the day of height, the day that lifts the light; ex audi, the day that waits for an answer. Today we step into the height, into a day that is not loud but wide, into a day that does not demand but opens, into a day that for centuries has invited people to lift their gaze and see the world as it is meant to be: clear, calm, carried by light. The height is not a festival, it is a stance, a quiet movement that says, I lift my gaze, I lift my breath, I lift my heart. Perhaps as you listen, a small sense of widening forms within you, a calm that does not stand still but carries, a clarity that does not cut but warms, a light that does not rise but accompanies. The height is an image for this moment, for a seeing that does not search but recognizes, for a light that does not push but guides, for a wideness that does not separate but gathers. Welcome to this day. Welcome to the height. Chapter 1. Welcome to a new episode of World of Words and to the second step in our special season, Days of the Ways. Yesterday we stood in the Bittwege, in that day that walks the fields and lays a quiet order over the world. Today we step into the height, into a day that does not begin but lifts, into a day that does not break open but opens upward, into a day that for centuries has invited people to raise their gaze and see the world as it is meant to be. The height is a quiet movement, a gesture that says, I lift my gaze, I lift my breath, I lift my heart. Perhaps as you listen, a small sense of widening forms within you, a calm that does not stand still but carries, a clarity that does not cut but warms, a light that does not need to be sought because it reveals itself. Imagine a morning in which the hills are still cool, and the light flows across the landscape like a quiet stream. A morning in which the steps do not hurry but follow. The wind, the light, the old line of a path that leads upward. The height is not a ritual of effort. It is a lifting that orders, a seeing that soothes, a breath that carries. Chapter 2. The Inner Scene. Perhaps a space opens within you when you hear this word, height. A space that does not push outward but rises inward. A space that does not open but widens. A space that does not demand but carries. Imagine standing in an early morning before the day has found its direction. The air is clear but not cold. The light is present but not loud. It lies over the world like a quiet stream. It is waiting for you to lift your gaze. Perhaps you feel within you a movement that does not hurry, does not press, does not search. A movement that aligns. A movement that says, I lift my gaze, I lift my breath, I lift my heart. The height is an inner gesture, a gesture of opening, not comparing, a gesture of seeing, not judging, a gesture of lifting, not fleeing. Perhaps you notice how thoughts that were narrow grow wider, not because you force them, but because the light orders them. How feelings that were heavy grow lighter, not because you push them away, but because the gaze lifts them. How a breath that was shallow grows deeper, not because you control it, but because the height accompanies it. The height is an inner space in which you can feel that wideness is not made, but arises. That clarity is not sought, but grows. That light is not chosen, but becomes visible. Perhaps you see within you no great images, no strong symbols, no loud signs. Perhaps you see only a line, a quiet line running through your inner landscape, like an old path that has always been there, but becomes visible only now. The height is an image for this moment, for a seeing that does not compare but recognizes, for a light that does not demand but guides, for a wideness that does not separate but gathers. Perhaps a sentence forms within you, not loud but lasting. I may see, I may breathe, I may widen. The height is an inner place in which you can feel that every gaze carries a small wideness, a wideness that does not come from outside, but from within you. Chapter 3: The Outer Scene. Imagine a landscape in which the morning does not simply begin, but lifts. A landscape in which the light does not rise, but rests. In which the air does not push, but carries. In which the ground does not demand, but opens. Perhaps it is a hillside where the dew still lies like a quiet shimmer of early day. Perhaps an old mountain path, narrow, unassuming, yet carried by centuries. Perhaps a high trail that connects valleys, orders lines, and gathers the world into gentle wideness. The height is a path not made for haste, but for seeing. A path that does not connect, but opens. A path that does not shorten, but lifts. Perhaps you hear footsteps on this way, not hurried, not heavy, but calm. Footsteps that do not drive, but follow. The wind, the light, the old line of the path. The wind moves the grasses, not searching, but ordering, as if it were gently arranging the world so that everything finds its place. The birds sing, not loudly but clearly, as if they were not opening the morning but affirming it. Perhaps you see hands brushing over stone, not to test but to thank. Perhaps a face turning toward the light, not to search but to rest. The height is not an event, it is a state. A state in which the world says, here everything may be wide. Here everything has light. Here everything becomes clear. Perhaps you notice how this outer scene awakens an inner wideness in you, how the light lifts something within you, how the wind clarifies something in you, how the morning aligns something in you. The height is a space in which the outer and the inner reflect one another, a space in which you can feel, I am part of a way that carries light. Perhaps at the end of the path you see no decision, no crossroads, no pressure. Perhaps you see only a line that continues, a line that does not ask but guides. The height is an image for this morning, for a seeing that orders, for a light that leads without pushing, for a world that does not grow larger but clearer. Chapter 4. The Word. Origin, Sound, Meaning. When we open the word height, we do not only open space above the world, we open a linguistic space that has carried wideness, light, gaze and clarity for centuries. Height, a word that unfolds slowly as you speak it. Height, one movement, one lifting, one quiet opening, and within it a space in which something rises. 4.1. Height, an old world of wideness and light. The first layer of the word leads us deep into the history of Germanic speech. Height belongs to those ancient words that do not only name a place, but a stance. In early texts, Höhe did not only mean the above, but also the elevated, the whole, the good. The height was a space in which one could see what was once felt below, a place that said, here the world becomes wide. When we speak of the height today, this old trust still resonates, not as superiority but as opening, not as a distance but as a wideness. 4.2. Height, a word that carries movement. A second look reveals height is not a state, it is a movement, a way that does not lead away but lifts, a line that does not separate but opens. In older cultures, the height was always more than a summit. It was a transition, a sign, a connection between inner and outer. The height said, here you may see, here you may widen. When we speak of the height today, this meaning remains, a space that does not only show but carries. 4.3. The sound, soft, wide, light. When we speak the word height slowly, a sound emerges that lifts. The beginning is open, the middle soft, the ending wide. It is a word that does not push but opens. A word that does not cut but warms. A word that does not demand but carries. Perhaps you feel as you hear it how something in you widens, not loudly but quietly, not abruptly but softly. The sound of this word is itself a small path, from inner to outer, from outer to inner, from the unclear to the bright. 4.4 The meaning. Gaze, wideness, light. The height carries many layers. Gaze, the movement that opens. Wideness, the stance that trusts. Light, the line that carries. In older calendars, the day of the height was a day in which people walked upward to see the whole, the valley, the village, the fields, the ways. But the deeper meaning lies not in the ascent, but in the gesture. A gaze that does not compare but recognizes. A wideness that does not separate but gathers. A light that does not demand but guides. The height is a day in which the world lifts, and the inner world lifts with it. 4.5 Why this word carries. Height is a word that does not only name but opens. It is a word that does not only describe but widens. It is a word that does not only explain but lifts. Perhaps you feel as you hear it how this word opens a space within you. A space in which something becomes clear. A thought, a breath, a gaze. The height reminds us wideness does not arise from quick ascent. It arises from quiet lifting, from seeing, from breathing, from the light that reveals itself when we are ready to see it. Chapter 5 Linguistic Miniatures. When we open the word height, we do not find a single meaning. We find a landscape, a field of quiet gestures, a set of small windows through which wideness, light, and clarity reveal themselves. Each miniature is its own space, a space of gaze, of breath, of line, of lifting, of clarity, of light. Let us open these spaces one by one. 5.1 Gaze, the smallest form of wideness. The gaze is one of the oldest movements of perception. It is small, unassuming, yet carrying. A gaze does not say, I have understood. It says, I see. On the height, the gaze is not searching, not comparing, not measuring. It is a quiet opening, a lifting of the eyes. That is also a lifting of the inner world. Perhaps you feel how a single gaze widens something in you, how it opens a space that does not come from outside, but from within. The gaze is the smallest form of wideness, and yet it carries the greatest effect. 5.2 Breath, the language of lifting. Breath is a word often overlooked because it sounds so ordinary. Yet, in its depth, it is an ancient sign of life, of wideness, of light. On the height, breath is not effort, not strain, not pushing. It is a lifting, a widening, a quiet opening of the space within you. Perhaps you feel how this word brings light into you, how it does not take but gives. Breath is the quiet sister of clarity. 5.3 Line, the form that carries. A line is more than a shape. It is a direction, a gesture, a stance. A line says, here the world lifts. On the height, the line is not a border, not an edge, not an ending. It is an upward movement, a way that does not lead away but opens. Perhaps you see before you the narrow ridge of a hill, a bright edge in the light, a line that does not ask but carries. The line is the form in which the height reveals itself. 5.4 Rising, the gesture of opening. Rising is a quiet word, a word that does not push but lifts, a word that does not demand but guides. In older traditions, rising did not mean effort, but approach, not struggle but wideness. Perhaps you feel how this word opens a soft movement in you, a lifting that does not press upward but widens inward. Rising is the gesture with which the world opens. 5.5 Clarity, the language of light. Clarity is a word that cannot be loud. It carries a stillness that is not empty but wide. On the height, clarity is not judgment, not sharpness, not hardness. It is a light that settles, a recognition that does not separate but gathers. Perhaps you feel how a moment of clarity orders something in you without naming it. Clarity is the language of light as it reveals itself. 5.6 Light, the sound of the height. Light is not a state that appears suddenly. Light is a movement that lifts. On the height, light does not arise from effort, from decision, from aim. It arises from the act of seeing itself, from the gaze that lifts, from the breath that widens, from the line that appears. Perhaps you know this moment. You stand and suddenly something in you becomes bright. Not because you act, but because the height carries you. Light is the quiet sound of the height, a sound that says, it may become wide. Chapter 6 Cultural Miniatures. Across Europe and far beyond, the gesture of height appears in many quiet forms, not as a spectacle, not as a command, but as a movement, a gaze that opens, a breath that widens, a step that lifts the world into clarity. These cultural miniatures are not grand rituals. They are lived gestures, small, steady ways in which people have met the land with presence. Let us open these scenes one by one. 6.1 Germany, the hill paths of early light. In Germany, the paths of the height were once familiar rhythm of spring. People walked upward not to conquer but to see. The view over the valley was a quiet assurance. I see the whole. I find my place within it. The ascent was slow, the morning cool, the world wide. The height was not triumph, it was a gaze that carried. 6.2 Austria, the chapels above the valley. In Austria, the height often led to a small chapel, a cross, a quiet platform of stone in which the valley opened like a soft breath. The path was steep but not heavy. It was carried by centuries of footsteps, voices, and silence. At the top, the landscape spread out like a calm exhale. The path said, "See how everything belongs together." 6.3 Switzerland. The quiet riches. In Switzerland, the paths of the height followed narrow ridges that lie clear and calm above the valleys. The wind moves steadily, a soft, constant presence. It accompanies the steps like an old rhythm that says, "Follow what carries." The Swiss height is a path of clarity, a path that shows that order is not loud, but flowing. 6.4 France. The ways to the Belvederes. In France, the height appears in the ascent of the Belvederes, those quiet viewpoints over rivers, towns, and long, soft valleys. People walked upward not to escape, but to understand. The view was a conversation between landscape and soul. The height was a space in which the world ordered itself. 6.5 Italy. The hilltop paths between olive groves. In Italy, the height is found in the warm paths between olive trees and rolling hills. The morning light rests gently on the leaves. The air is soft, the world unhurried. People walk upward to feel the warmth of a landscape that opens without pressure. The Italian height is a path of warmth, a path that shows that wideness can be soft. 6.6 Spain. The hermitage trails above the plains. In Spain, small hermitages stand on solitary hills, their stones warmed by centuries of sun. People walk upward to greet the morning, to feel the quiet of the high air, to see the plains stretching far below. The height here is a gesture of stillness, a way of meeting the world from above without leaving it behind. 6.7 Greece. The terrace paths toward the sky. In Greece, the height is found in the terraces that rise gently toward the sky. Stone steps, dry walls, narrow paths that follow the curve of the hillside. People walk them to greet the season, to feel the land's breath, to honor the rhythm of growth and rest. The height is a soft ascent into belonging. 6.8 Scotland. The high moors and quiet summits. In Scotland, the height appears in the quiet moorland hills, where the wind moves slow and steady across the heather. The ascent is gentle, the world wide, the horizon open. The height here is a path of stillness, a way of seeing without searching. 6.9 Japan. The paths to mountain temples. Far from Europe, in Japan, a quiet counterpart appears in the ascent to mountain temples, where the morning flows over the steps like a soft stream. People walk, not to ask but to honor. The height is a sign of the relationship between human and sky. The path says, "I lift my gaze because I am part of this light." Across these landscapes, this gesture is the same: lifting, seeing, widening, the line that carries, the gaze that opens. The height is a European heritage, but its inner gesture is universal. Chapter 7: International Miniatures. When we look beyond Europe, we find that the gesture of the height, the lifting, the seeing, the widening, appears in many places, not identical but resonant, not the same but kindred in spirit. These scenes are not about geography, they are about gesture, the way a path can open a world, the way a morning can gather a person, the way a gaze can become a quiet act of belonging. Let us walk these paths slowly, one after another, as if moving through a quiet atlas of early light. 7.1 Germany, the morning path along the hillside. Imagine a hillside in early morning. The air is cool but not cold. The light rests on the slope like a soft hand that has known this land for centuries. A narrow path runs along the hill, still damp with dew, still carrying the breath of night. You walk slowly, not because the path is steep, but because the morning lifts you. The grasses lean gently as if listening. The wind moves softly, as if arranging the world into quiet lines. And somewhere within you, a sentence forms, not loud but lasting. Here begins the wideness that carries me. The German hillside is a place where clarity does not arrive suddenly, but rises with the light. 7.2 Austria, the path to the chapel above the valley. In Austria, a hillside path leads upward toward a small chapel overlooking the valley. The ascent is steady, but not heavy. It is carried by centuries of footsteps, voices, and silence. As you walk, the valley slowly opens beneath you. Fields, roofs, rivers, all settling into a place like a quiet map. At the top, the landscape spreads out like a calm breath. The path says, "See how everything belongs together." The Austrian height is a place where wideness is not distance, but connection. 7.3 Switzerland, the ridge path above the clouds. In Switzerland, the height appears as a narrow ridge that lies quiet and clear above the valley. The wind moves steadily, a soft, constant presence. The light rests gently on the stones. The world opens in long, quiet lines. You walk with a sense that clarity is not sharpness, but flow. A movement of the world that does not cut, but carries. The Swiss ridge is a place where the gaze does not rise abruptly, but widens with each step. 7.4 Italy, the hill paths between olive groves. In Italy, the height is found in the warm paths between olive trees and rolling hills. The morning light is soft, the air warm, the world unhurried. The path winds gently between silver leaves that shimmer in the early sun. You walk slowly, feeling the warmth of a landscape that opens without pressure. The path seems to say, "Walk slowly, the world has time." The Italian height is a place where wideness is not cool but warm. 7.5 France. The high meadow above the river. In France, a high meadow overlooks a winding river. The grasses sway gently, their movement slow, their sound soft. The air is bright, the horizon wide. You walk with a sense that the world is opening without effort, a widening that does not push but invites. The French height is a place where the gaze does not search but settles. 7.6 Scotland. The quiet summit of the moorlands. In Scotland, a gentle summit rises above the moor. The wind is low, the light pale, the world vast. The heather moves in long, soft ways, as if breathing. You walk with a sense that the wideness is not distance, but presence, a way of being with a land without needing to claim it. The Scottish height is a place where the world opens quietly, like a thought finding its shape. 7.7 Canada. The high forest lookout. In Canada, a trail leads upward through tall pines to a quiet lookout over lakes and hills. The air is crisp, the light soft, the world immense. You walk with a sense that the forest is breathing beside you. A slow, steady presence that does not speak but accompanies. The Canadian height is a place where the gaze does not rise alone, but rises with the land. 7.8 New Zealand. The ridge above the valley. In New Zealand, a ridge path follows the curve of a wide valley. The morning is bright, the air clear, the world open. The hills roll gently, their lines soft, their colors warm. You walk with a sense of gentle belonging, as if the land were guiding you without words, without pressure, simply by being itself. The New Zealand height is a place where wideness feels like home. 7.9 Peru. The Andean Terrace Path. High in the Andes, terraces rise in long, quiet lines along the mountain. The air is thin, the light sharp, the world immense. You walk slowly, feeling the breath of the land, the rhythm of the earth, the quiet relationship between human and place. Each step is a small act of respect, a way of acknowledging the vastness around you and the steadiness beneath you. The Andean height is a place where the gaze does not lift upward, but deepens. Across these landscapes, the gesture is the same. A gaze that opens, a breath that widens, a world that lifts. The height is not a single tradition. It is a way of seeing that the world recognizes. Chapter 8 Meditation. The breath of the height. Find a posture in which your breath has room and your body can soften. Perhaps you sit, perhaps you stand, perhaps you lie down. Everything carries as long as you feel carried. Let the day move gently into the background. The sounds around you become a soft fabric. Thoughts that appear drift onward like clouds, while you remain here in this moment, in this breath. And now imagine you are standing on a height, a narrow ridge, a bright hillside, a path that rises like a quiet breath of morning. The light lies wide over the landscape. It rests on the lines of the world like a hand that touches the earth and gives it shape. The air is clear and friendly. The day breathes slowly. You feel the ground beneath your feet. It carries you with a wideness that spreads through your body. It holds you with a clarity that lifts your breath. Breathe in, slowly, widely. Breathe out, a little further, a little softer. With each breath, the height opens a little more. It reveals itself with a quiet certainty. It invites you without urging. It accompanies you as you become ready for the first gaze. And then you lift it, only a little. A gaze that is soft, a gaze that gives space, a gaze that brings light. With this gaze, a small wideness forms within you. A thought finds its place. A feeling receives a shape. A breath becomes wider. The morning settles into you like a quiet river. You remain standing, simply so. A moment in which the world widens and you widen with it. Perhaps you see the fine lines in the grass drawn by the wind. Perhaps you hear the soft rustling of the height. Perhaps you feel the warmth of the light on your skin. The height is a space in which you can feel, I may see, I may breathe, I may widen. The day carries you. The light accompanies you. The height opens you. Chapter 9. The day of the height does not end at the summit. It ends in the gaze. When you walk downward again, the wideness remains in you. When you leave the light, its warmth stays. When you step off the ridge, the clarity it opened continues to move with you. Perhaps you see how the path lowers itself again, how the lines of the world settle into the valley, how the day gathers. Yet something in you remains lifted, a thought that brightens, a breath that widens, a space that opens. Perhaps you feel how the warmth of the light still rests on your skin, how the wind of the height still echoes within your breath, how the stillness of the morning still moves quietly within you. The height accompanies you even when you leave it. It settles into you like a soft line that does not end but continues. Perhaps you notice how the sky above you seems a little larger, how the air around you seems a little clearer, how the world before you seems a little wider. The height is not a place. It is a gesture, a lifting, a seeing, a widening that remains. In our next episode, we will step into the third space of this early May movement, ex audi, the day that waits for an answer. Until then, keep the wideness, the clarity, the quiet light of this height. Thank you for listening. Thank you for walking here. If you feel called to wander a little deeper, scripts, audio pieces, and small companion materials are available on my channels including YouTube and Payhip. Perhaps one of them will walk a little further with you.